There's about 40 stacks, I guess.
What are some of the new ones you've added?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I could identify every one of them, but like this stack is the physical world. But if you look at it, you know, in other words, the actual material is in the pieces that it's made up of. So you know, I mean, let's just take this one for example. This is the physical world, as I said. Up here we have the economics of non-convex ecosystems,
Hmm.
and here we have environmental accounting, and here we have statistical challenges in astronomy, and the rise and decline of public interest in global economy. Natural resource economics. Greening of U.S. foreign policy. I don't know. I don't know if that's the appropriate stack to put it in.
Sure.
Energy in the future.
Is one of these stacks going to be sort of like the main focus for the book, or
Oh no no
how you'll
no
start the
no
book?
no. I mean, you know, I mean, my ultimate objective is to have one unified system
I see.
so it all fits together. Okay, the Handbook of Environmental Voluntary Agreements, Free Market Environmentalism, uh,
Which stack do you think would be the first chapter of the book?
the first chapter. Well, that's a good question. I don't really know which is going to be the first chapter. Probably, well, you know, it's going to be some kind of survey, so a combination of different chapters. Ethics of the global environment, and finally, sustainable environmental economics and management. So, yeah. Oh, there's even more there. Okay, and that's one stack. So you can guess what the things in general are. Saving. Oh yeah, saving the planet with pesticides and plastic.
Is that a little bit contrarian?
Well, what's wrong with contrary?
What?
I think we should have contrary views.
Sure. What do you got in the white notes there?
Yeah.
See, you've added some little white notes on top of the yellow cards. What are
What are you
those?
talking? Oh, these things. Yeah, yeah. That's exactly right.
Oh, is that like a label for what's in the stack, sort of, or just some additional
No, no.
thoughts?
It's extra thoughts that apply to that particular section. So that will give you some kind of a feel for what's going on. Okay, that's that. This stack is evolution and Darwinism. This particular stack over here. I could go through that, but I won't. This stack is prehistoric or early human uh, life on the Earth. The stacks up here are technical. On that last thing over here, I got, you know, mathematics is there, and well, let's see what we got. Okay, this is optimization. Optimization in general, because there's some degree of optimality in what we do, and there's, I think, national income might be there because that's typically supposed to be a measure of progress, but not a very good one. And here we have, let's see, the nature of mathematics. Is it socially constructed?
Is it?
No. Of course, that depends on what you mean by socially constructed. And then, I'm not looking, Matty, and Nicholas Rescher on the concept of complexity or complexity theory. A primer of infinitesimal analysis. It's essentially non-standard mathematics, so to speak.
Sure.
I've got a section on physics. The second law of thermodynamics turns out to be quite important in this whole thing.
And you're going to try to squeeze all of this into your book, including
Well,
non-standard
obviously,
analysis?
only a small fraction of
Okay.
it to get into it. And, the second law of thermodynamics is largely a matter of the minimization of largely a minimization of potential energy theory. In other words, chemical reactions tend to end up with smaller potential energy. That means if you have an adiabatic system in which there's nothing going through the boundaries, kinetic energy goes up, and that's why you find lots of vibrations and rotations in the world. And another aspect of the second law is variability. So that's quite important too, and together you put them together and you get something like what's called entropy, which tends to be maximized over time. But I think for physics that is still a mysterious concept.
What about in terms of communication and information?
Yeah, well, I mean, once you get that, then now you're talking about a whole bunch of other stacks.
Oh.
Okay, and this is ergodic theory and measure theory and power laws and computer science handbook, design and analysis of algorithms, set valued analysis. I'm just reading the top thing. I don't know if it's typical of what's going on. Mathematical methods in science and engineering. Okay, so that's that. And then we come to this one. Stated, well, this looks like, stated choice methods, analysis and applications, random graph dynamics, the production of knowledge, it's still kind of mixed up. Imputation, let's see. Regression analysis, validity generalization, well, whatever that is. Selecting model from data. So in other words, this is more or less statistics, statistical inference. Sturdy econometrics, handbook of research on nature. Handbook of research on nature-inspired computing for economics and management. Multivariate models on dependent concepts. Uncertainty analysis with high-dimensional dependence modeling. So, you know, it covers quite a few things. Mixture models and market switching. Econometric model selection. Okay, so that's that. And the final chapter thing in that corner is probability theory. And it's, well, let's see. I mean, even that's not a correct statement, but we can just leave it there. Okay, so that takes care of what? These two things are economics of one sort or another.
Is your book in there?
No.
Oh.
You know, I mean, I could read the things, but it's like okay, here. What's economics worth?
What's the answer?
That depends who's writing. So, I mean, it continues valuing policy research, and then debt the first 5,000 years.
Oh yeah, what'd you think of that book?
You know that book?
I've heard people talk about it. I haven't read it.
It's by an anthropologist for one thing, and that is extremely important because it's you know you're taking a cross section. People are not neutral, so to speak. Some people owe debt. Some people are entitled to debt, and you know that has sometimes involved going into slavery, sometimes involved going into jail for a while. So it's quite important in terms of the overall structure of society over time. Okay, let's see. Values and economic theory. A section on insurance. Investment, capital market imperfections, and uncertainty. Information strategy and public policy. The behavioral approach to asset pricing. Economic concepts for the social sciences. That's my old colleague Todd Sandler. I don't know if you ever met him. I think you did.
So he was at Iowa State?
No. Well, he was at Iowa State, but he went to somewhere in California at a very large salary increase. Cultural contradictions of capitalism.
Well, you chuckle about that one.
That's actually by a well-known sociologist Daniel Bell, who also wrote The Coming of Post-Industrial Society.
Is it here yet?
I beg your pardon?
Is Post-Industrial Society here yet?
Uh, so postal
Has
is
it happened?
what?
Has post-industrial society arrived yet?
Well, that's a matter of opinion,
Okay.
a matter of definition. The theory of
Okay.
incentives. Let's see. Chaos and nonlinear dynamics in financial markets. I mean, this is not orthodox stuff. You wouldn't find most of this being taught in econ classes. Rational expectations. The representative agent in macroeconomics, which he doesn't like. Manias, panics, and crashes, a history of financial crises. Yeah, let's see, let's just take all of this and finish it. Endogenous economic fluctuations. In other words, this is about business cycles and so forth, which, however, are not as regular as you might expect from the word cycle. So that's that, and this one is what? Essays on the foundations of game theory, which I have a low opinion of, by the way.
Game theory in general?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, there's actually two kinds of game theory. There's economic game theory, which was invented by John von Neumann, and then there is biological game theory, which they correctly point out actually makes more sense. In other words, you can have, let's say, hawks versus doves in the state of nature, in which doves retreat to hawks, etc., etc., and that makes much more sense. So I'm going to have game theory here because it's very popular in economics still.
Why don't you like economic game theory?
Well, because for one thing, you don't know what game you're playing.
Oh.
So that's a big thing, and secondly, the results of game theory are not particularly important. Like let's see, who is that? Oh, Nash equilibrium, that kind of stuff. I consider that trivial kind of sort of thing. Let's see, and this is okay. Then we get into a whole very large section on speculation, and then finally a
You mean
very
like
large
financial markets?
right speculation in financial markets.
Hmm.
That's including a lot of mathematical stuff and analyzing and interpreting the yield curve. That's the theory of insurance, theory of interest. Sorry. So it's a big thing, but by no means conclusive because it's competing with uh, anthropology and sociology and psychology in terms of what actually motivates people. When you go to economics, you go to the family and you go to the individual, and they're supposed to maximize utility. So you have to combine what does utility mean in that sense? Or they maximize uh, profits. Now, what does that mean? Especially, what does it mean over time? And finally, they could maximize lifetime income, but that brings demography into the picture. So it's a very imperfect criteria for what people do. Okay, and here we have a big section on Bayesian probability. Okay, and that completes this particular thing. Now, what do we have here? Let's see, human evolution and the origin of hierarchies, which I can summarize by saying, when you get past a certain point, you know, things grow in size. I mean, we did not have nations before. Then we did not have, smaller entities. So they're growing over time, but that involves the structure of administrative, things to coordinate it, and and since there are a relatively small number of leaders relative to followers, that is the basic idea of inequality that occurs. So this is fairly important. Let's see, where am I? Oh, right over here. I think I'll just take a sample. I'm not going to try to read everything. Yeah, comparative historical analysis in the social sciences. Bandits and bureaucrats in the Ottoman Empire. So, okay, I have stuff here. Oh, yeah. Relation of the sexes. Right over here. And I think I've written that. You may have read about that already. And then
Well, what do you have to say about that? I don't think I did read your note about that.
oh, I think you did. I think you remember I started with Abraham and God, and God promises Abraham to make his descendants as numerous excuse me, as numerous as the stars in the sky or the grains of sand on the beach. So that obviously is a very deep desire of Abraham and presumably of the people who lived at that time. And that means that there's competition for population growth, and that is a source of war. It's a source of female subordination because they have to be almost continuously pregnant all the time. And the division of labor is such that males tend to specialize in hunting and warfare, of course, and females tend to specialize in gathering and child rearing, and also in negotiation, you might say, bringing sides together. I mean, that's why I've become a feminist in my old age, which I wasn't at the beginning, because I think that the greater the fraction of women that are governing where we are, the less likely there is to be world war, and the more, and also of course, it's related to the overpopulation, which I think is plaguing us. Okay, so that's let's see, where was I? Right over here. Okay, so let's leave that thing alone. Okay, and this is evolutionary explanation in the social sciences. I'm bringing in non-economists here. Principles of social evolution, neo-Schumpeterian approaches in economics, strategic commitment and other essays, the sociology-philosophy connection, group-based modeling of development, principles of economic sociology, and and a bunch of pure sociology stuff. So I'm each one of them has an influence in various parts, and I don't consider any of them to be. Let's see. Okay, that let's consider that to be finishing that column. Okay, then we come to a very important thing which I didn't have before: language. Very important. Um,
How would you summarize the importance of it?
well, I mean, the importance of it is that language is a necessary condition to communicate. I mean, you ask what distinguishes the human race from everything else. The answer is language. It is the possibility of I mean there are some primitive forms of language among non-human species, but it's very limited, obviously. And what language does is it has a kind of uh, I'm not quite sure how to describe it, but a multivariate structure that can focus in on things and communicate very, very specific pieces of information from one person to another. And that is one of the keys to the growth of civilization. So that's where language comes in. And okay, so what do we have here? Okay, here's the concept of multivariate or multi-layer organization, which is what I think you remember I talked about R as being resources, space, and time. The R is definitely miscarried carriage because I treated R in the same way that I treat S and T. In other words, punctile. I can talk about one single resource over here. And of course, the word resource is itself not correct because you've got ilth as well as wealth. Sewage is a form of resource according to my definition. Okay, so let's see. So that's multi-layer optimizing. I'll skip over more on that chapter. Then we come to this section, which is human nature. At least human nature, which isn't covered in other sections. Docility and power, status quo bias, social distance, explanation of behavior, that could be a lot of things, sublime experience, gambling, attitudes, personality, and behavior, economic survival, odd aspects of human behavior, you could say somewhat unrational, handbook of emotions. Okay, so that's that little thing. I should say that uh, this arrangement still has a pretty radical future. I'm definitely not done with that.
Do you think you'll have fewer stacks or more stacks?
Um, it could be both because I know some parts of some stacks are more favorably put elsewhere, and that would increase some and decrease the others. Um, I think I think I have a feeling that this is a complete whole in some sense or other. Okay, so let's see, where was I? Okay, legal. Okay, now we come to one of the classic things. Uh, The concept of duty, the concept of coordination, uh, the, the legal concept in general. Let's see what we have here. Okay, reciprocity is universal. That is to say, you do good to people who do you good and vice versa. You try to punish people who do you bad.
That sounds a little bit like tit for tat from game theory.
Well, it is right. Yeah, that is true. But as I say, I don't think game theory makes so much sense at the at the level it's at now.
Okay.
Okay, classification of prima facie duties. In other words, what I'm saying is the sense of obligation is now part of human nature.
Hmm.
How it got there, we have to explain also.
Sure.
Price principle on the environment. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Contract economics. Okay. The result of people coordinating with each other is that they come to agreements very often, and that brings us to contract law. And the other aspect, by the way, is property. That's extremely important. Property, in effect, is an effort by society, you might say, to avoid more than one boss of a particular section of the economy, and it also includes slavery for many, even most most societies, I think. Okay, so let's see where we are.
Well, thankfully, not most anymore, though, right?
That's right. That's right. It's evolving, and we have to explain why it is evolving in that respect. Okay. Okay. Contract economics. Okay, and the section on crime. What is crime? Crime is when you have opposition with one side much weaker than the other.
So you're saying the criminals are the weaker side?
Yeah, right. The
Okay.
criminals are the weaker side. Otherwise, they wouldn't be criminals. If they become stronger, then you've got war instead of crime. And if they become still stronger, they become the state, and the other guys become the criminals.
Is that your way of thinking of it, or is that something you've picked up from
Well,
somebody
yeah, I
else?
mean, no, it's a reasonable way of thinking of it. I mean, the basic idea is that you've got hostility, and if the hostility consists of unequal entities, then you've got that's defined as crime.
Hmm.
I mean, if you object to that, I'd like to hear what it is. And then I have a long section of Richard Posner's type stuff, law and literature and so forth. So, okay, that's that little column. And I might say that these things out here, this is what you might call the subject of justice. So what is justice as opposed to uh, fairness or morality? Well, it's where you have a population of some sort, and you have to find the proper way of distributing wealth and income among that particular population. So, or is that? Let's see. Is that this thing or the other thing? Contemporary debates in moral theory. Hmm. Oh, well, there's some other stuff in here which I won't talk about. What makes us moral? Ideal. Well, actually, I think that I might be mixing it up with this particular thing. Ideal codes in real world. Okay, so and this is a long discussion of utilitarianism is in there, and also a long discussion of virtue ethics. Have I ever discussed the relation between those two?
I think so. But
Yeah, I
what was
once
your
yeah
capsule summary of what you're thinking?
yeah I once described virtue ethics as the the dynamics of utilitarianism, and in particular, if if you're dissatisfied with the way you value things, what you have to do is to improve things, and that generally relates to virtue ethics. You know, things like uh, consistency, bravery, prudence, things of that particular sort. Okay, so that's one little pile. That's where we get to morality in general, and what we have to do is to indicate where that comes from in terms of the rest of the stuff, and what its impact is in terms of the rest of the stuff. And this, oops, no. One problem is to get this stuff in equilibrium. Okay, and this is, what is this? Okay, no, it looks like this is utilitarianism. I have mentioned my evaluation of Bentham to you in the past. I think I consider Bentham to be the prime thinker on of utilitarianism. But the problem with Bentham is that he has a very poor concept of what human nature is like. I mean, to him, it's under two sovereign masters, pleasure and pain, and that's it. So, for one thing, it doesn't explain himself, and for another thing, it's a very impoverished concept of human nature, and it has led him to go into uh, you know programs which are not only useless but cruel. Actually, the idea of isolating people in the panopticon, so one person can survey others and they can't tell when they're being surveyed.
Sure.
That was actually instituted in certain places, and I consider that a very poor outcome. Okay, what
How
else
would
we got?
better taking account of human nature have saved him from that error? I think something about human nature makes it obvious that that's not a good idea. I mean, I agree with you, it's not a good idea, but how would you say it in terms of human nature? Just the need
Well,
to
I mean,
socialize, or
yeah, I mean, you can say, I mean, that is pretty damaging to people's mental health,
sure,
for one
okay,
thing,
okay,
and and so forth. Bentham has a lot of good ideas, like what legislation should be like, legislatures. But okay, so let's see what we got here. Okay, and then, oops, a lot on the origin of inequality is in here also. Get up there. Yeah. So I think let's just say there are other fundamental aspects of mathematics, morality, which you hear. It see this and that last thing that I talked about is a pretty big hunk of the whole. And okay, so let's see that. Okay, this is ideology. Uh, so maybe there's no point in going into too much. I think, in other words, your basic set of values, the basic set of things that you're working toward, your interpretation of other people and so forth and so on, that would be in here. And then I have, okay, political ideas of the Romantic Age. So I've got utopias in here and so forth. And in particular, I've got a long section on religion right over here, which is part of that. That's where ideology comes from. And the explanation of religion is actually fairly straightforward. It doesn't have to be based on miracles. It has to be based on the fact that if people begin believing this particular set of ideas, especially the ideas that your ancestors are trying to make things better in terms of your society, and that there's some immortal God who is all-seeing and very stern and will send you to hell forever if you do not obey. You can see that is a very strong impulse for people shaping up, so to speak. And of course, that's becoming less and less relevant over time, which is actually a good thing because the various religions, since they're so fundamental, they tend to be very hostile to each other. In other words, if you say a prayer with a few words wrong, that might be the end of you.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's where we are on that. And let's see, what do we have here? Okay, oh, no, this is just a miscellaneous collection. What do we have here? Okay. This is an attempt to actually fill in what you see. In other words, here's your mind, exactly what is in your mind, and that turns out to be fairly complicated.
So you mean like consciousness, qualia, or?
No, I'm not talking about consciousness per se, but of you what you have is first of all a spatial distribution of a spatial time distribution of external events, the physical events, uh, rain and ice ages and stuff like that. There, that's part of it. You have the sense of other human beings being distributed, of which you know some personally. You have others by reputation and so forth and so on. It's very important in all of this stuff to differentiate the amount of time that you're talking about. Okay, so I have, just to indicate this, a theory of production, tasks, efficiency, wages, feature extraction. It sounds a little bit like economics should be here. New markets and new opportunities.
It sounds a lot like economics.
Like what?
All of that stuff sounds like economics.
Right. A lot of it does. Uh, Psychological essentialism. I talk about children, you've got, I mean, you start here. Children have certain instincts which come into play as they grow older, and that's quite important. Um, Names for structures, I won't go into that any. Um, Communication, emotion theory and social structure, psychology of social movements, very important. Group group formation. Group formation means that for some reason or other, the barriers to communication from one individual to another shrink. It could be because they're in a crowd. It could be because they, over time, recognize the possibility of combining in strength and getting their way, et cetera, things like that. So that's group formation. Profiles, probabilities, and stereotypes. Quantitative analysis of movement. Okay, that should be enough for that little pile. What have we here? Okay, I think this is about the nature of planning or, let's see, product design. Uh, this is technology in general. Power is means to ends. Okay, in other words, you're interested in something, you do something which increases your own power, which allows you to do something else in the future. Economic foundations of strategy. Then a section on Thomas Hobbes, who is the philosopher of power, basically.
Would you say you're an admirer of Hobbes?
Who?
Do you admire Hobbes?
Yeah.
Or do you think he's mostly correct in his analysis?
Well, I admire him. I don't think he's necessarily mostly correct, but in fact, Hobbes was an advocate of absolute sovereignty, and because he thought that everybody was suspicious of everybody else, and the only way you could work that out was to give all power basically to one individual or a group of individuals, as he says. And needless to say, that there are defects in that, very strongly criticized by Locke later on. Okay, so let's see where we are. Yeah. And the question is, how do you deal with these things? You know, you have a cross section of how things are, based largely on memory, and then what do you do about it? So I have a little section on entrepreneurship and leadership, and I've mentioned that that is one major source of inequality. And let's see. Well, maybe I'm not continue with that. But Okay, now we come to individuals again, and talking about ego expansion and property asymmetry. In other words, when something becomes your property, it becomes more valuable to you. In other words, people will buy it at a certain price, but they will not resell it at that price.
Sure.
Very common thing here. Attention control. This refers to uh, essentially not competing with yourself over time. In other words, good mental health, if you want. Thinking versus acting. Okay, that's an important thing here. When you think, what you want to do is to explore other possibilities. Science is thinking, for example. But when you act, it's important that you get coordination, and that's where you need leadership. So you've got these two different ways of approaching this, which will have to be balanced against each other. And let's see what we have here. Okay, cognitive science and folk psychology. Okay, conscious experience. Here we come to. And answer this question: why does consciousness exist, especially in a physical world?
Good question.
Very good question. And my answer is there's a what consciousness does, in my opinion, is bring various parts of your psyche or your brain, if you want, together. It's like I think of it analogous to having a corporation that's just running along, and every now and then you have to have a meeting of the leaders of the corporation. So I think that's a pretty good approach to that. And there are, I mean, there are certain specific individuals who have espoused that, especially one named Bars and another named Duchesne. Okay, so let's see, thinking versus acting. Okay, cognitive science. See, I mean, you're going to have cooperation and conflict at all levels, and that includes various parts of yourself. So, you know, what we considered mental disturbance and so forth and so on, and neurosis would be cases where you're self-conflicted. You want to do this and you want to do that, incompatible to do both of them. So you just you just live through that. The architecture of the mind. Intentionality. Intentionality is the idea that mental content is about something. That comes from a philosopher named Brentano. Conscious experience. Perceptual controls. Um, well, I'll give an example of perceptual controls. Suppose you look over there, and then you switch your eyes to there. If you didn't have conceptual controls, you would think that the entire world has shifted in the opposite direction. So, in other words, what the brain and the mind are doing is compensating for these particular shifts in perception. Um, and I mean that's quite important because one simple example is that retinal images, of course, are two-dimensional, and what you want to do is to get that third dimension in there because that tells you what the world is really like, and you you know, and that the logical positivists. I don't know if you've gone into that at all. They wanted to stop at at the retinal level. Somebody like Quine, and that doesn't make too much sense. So, in other words, what they wanted to do is to overrule what the brain is trying to do. Okay, all right. Now here we come to a big section on epistemology. How do we know something? Socializing epistemology. Methodology and epistemology for social sciences. Did you ever hear of Donald T. Campbell?
I'm not sure.
Well, I would say he's a great man who's been underestimated.
Well, what's his main focus?
Oh, this particular book? Well, it's several of his books. Methodology and Epistemology for Social Science. To give you a couple of other concepts. Variation and selective retention in socio-cultural economics. So in other words, he's using a lot of Darwinian stuff, but applying to everyday events. Descending certainties. Mathematics, the most certain. Experimental science next. Observational science next. And case histories last. Why is mathematics so certain, by the way?
Because it's deductive, is that right? It deals with deductive truth?
Yeah, but why? That doesn't explain anything. I think mathematics, Hume himself has a very interesting comment there. He says that mathematical proofs should not be accepted as certain. What happens is a mathematical proof is run over by your colleagues, and if they approve, that helps things a little bit, and then you expand that, and it helps again, and that. In other words, what he's saying is the concept of certainty in mathematics is no greater than the certainty in other fields. But the important thing is, when you're in mathematics, you can always say, oh, about this theorem, I was thinking it, but if I doubt it, I can go to the source and look at it again. And I think that is the key to why mathematics is so accepted. Okay, and then I have a log section on personal identity and self-consciousness. Yeah, I think you can see that this is not perfectly organized.
Do you need it to be perfectly organized before you can finish your writing?
It should be more organized than it is now,
Okay.
and I have various ideas as to what should go where. And it certainly helps. I mean, the way it started, it was complete chaos, basically. Okay, now we come to What do we come to? Okay, again, this is about human interaction. Uh, George Herbert Mead, a well-known social psychologist. Uh, Here we have a section on the antisocial personalities. There's a little thing there, but I really should have a pro-sociology. Pro. Well, let me put it this way: this particular stack refers to people who are allies. Why are they allies? Because they help each other by being close to each other, by supplying them with resources, etc., etc. And I also have a section on conflict and warfare, and both of them are likely to happen, and they do happen. And let's see what we have here. Okay, this is a section on democracy, largely, how that works in practice, and also a section on liberalism, which is, of course, allied to freedom. Okay, so I'll just skip over that one. Okay, and this is that little pile is the things that government has to do. But basically, government is a coordinator. In other words, here's somebody here, here's somebody here, and what they are doing might cancel each other out in some sense or other. So you have to have somebody up here to say, do this and you do that, to coordinate them over space. And so things like why cooperate? The incentive to supply global public goods, absolute duties versus consequentialism. You would think that why should there be absolute duties? Well, the answer is it's easier to think about absolute duties than about what I should do in this situation, what I should do in that situation. I haven't come to the concept of bounded rationality yet, but that's underlying a lot of stuff. Incomplete theorization. Um, it's impossible to put down all the conditions that a theory should satisfy. Okay, Cass Sunstein. You ever hear of him?
Yep.
And he has laws of fear. In other words, he's critiquing the critique of cost-benefit analysis. Thaler and Sunstein, nudge, improving decisions about health, wealth, and happiness. And then a long section on cost-benefit analysis and the theory of implementing socially optimal decisions, public goods and private wants. Okay, and then that continues in that column. So, all right, so that takes care of the top of the table, but I'm not done yet. This thing down here, and this is a section on free speech, misleading ideas. Yeah, here, I'll just read some of the things. The price of truth, how money affects the norms of science. The idea of propaganda. Corrupt histories. The economics of transparency in politics. The economics of audit quality. The value of privacy. Data protection law. The Campbell-Goodhart law. Well, that's. Let me let's see. Okay, legal secrets first. That's the same Campbell that I talked about before. The Campbell-Goodhart law, by the way, is this: the more any quantitative social indicator is used for social decision making, the more subject it will be to corruption.
Ah. Yeah, I think I've just heard that called Goodhart's law before.
Okay. So,
So
Goodhart is the economist, and Campbell is the psychologist in this. Okay, conspiracy, shame, rage, blame, and conspiracy. And I mentioned you talked about these white things I was adding. Here's what I added for this one. Conspiracy theorists tend to be theists. The world is run by powerful, rational, and secret forces. Just, just
you
a
think
little
that
side glance.
so you don't think there are too many atheist conspiracy theorists?
Well, I mean, obviously there's got to be some, but I think this is still the point that you'll find among theists. In other words, if you take a look at the people who are promulgating conspiracies, I think you will find them largely to be religious also.
Hmm.
Okay. That's something on Darwin. Theory of the Information Society. In other words, what are the sources of information? What are the newspapers? What's the structure of the media? The advanced communication things. That has to be put in because that's that lies behind all the other stuff. And I talked about various mythologies like the myth of crime and criminal justice, etc. So let's see where we are. Okay, that's this section. This is a section on pure philosophical ideas. Um, I'm not quite sure how to put this, but the difference between particulars and universals should be in there, etc.
Sure.
Okay, this is the section on science, or the scientific method. Nancy Cartwright, I don't know if you heard of her. The Dappled World. Science as a process. Stages in concept unification. Deliberation in science and democracy. The comparison there. Science and Method by Poincaré, etc., etc. Then I have a little section on Karl Popper, which is fairly critical. And then
But you would say you like Nancy Cartwright's work?
I do like Nancy Cartwright's work. I mean, but she's you know that thing where she said that how the laws of physics lie. That's LIE, and she says, suppose you release a dollar bill in a windy situation. How do you determine where it comes down?
Hmm.
She says science is helpless to do that. It doesn't have enough information.
Hmm.
And she thinks that is quite common in science in general. Let's see, paradigm. Let's see, Margulis, Goldman. These are Philip Kitcher. The metrics of science and technology. Okay, this is evaluation things. Okay, and here's Donald Campbell again. A tribal model of the social system vehicle carrying scientific knowledge. And science without myth, so called. The philosophy of nature. Um, Making 20th century theories. You know, well, I mean, some people have criticized uh, Einstein, I think, for, was it Einstein or somebody, for rediscovering what was already known.
Oh, can you give an example, at least for
Well,
Einstein?
let's see. Let's think about that. I'm not sure I can give you an example right
Oh, that's
now,
fine.
but that has happened, and they say, well, since that's known, why should that be considered a plus? In other words, if you can explain a known phenomenon by a different process that gets you to the same thing, is that a good thing or a bad thing, or is it trivial? And here's Stephen C. Brush. Making 20th century theories become knowledge. One of the things he says is that uh, reception of prediction needed, no old evidence. Old evidence is okay. And the reason is, of course, we do not have a complete probability distribution of how these things occur. You see, I mean, in other words, it's important to have several different ways of getting at the same thing, and each one of them should deserve credit. In the same way, by the way, in mathematics, it's quite important to prove some important theorem by several different methods.
Because each proof tells you something new, or
Exactly. Each proof tells you something, and it shows how they all fit together. Of course, if you prove something by one method and prove a contradictory by another method, that also tells you something. It tells you to go back and take another look.
sure.
Okay, and then we have observation and experiment. Let's see. Unmeasurable well, let's see. Let's continue that. Linguistic categorization, changing your conceptual apparatus. I should say, when I talked about, here's language, it's important to think that language not only goes from one person to another, but it goes from your former self to your future self.
Sure.
So, in other words, you're talking to yourself, and as a result, you're getting a more organized form of knowledge.
And I guess you can greatly expand your memory also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's see. Okay, linguistic categorization, and I have a little section on animal signals, and then appropriate level of precision. Aristotle says you shouldn't expect the same level of precision from a geometer as you would expect from someone who's just commenting on general life. So, and the concept of clear versus, well, let's see, doubt, clear, and convincing evidence. Well, in any case, there is an appropriate level of precision. Um, Standardization and scientific experimentation, very important. because you want to hold everything else constant if you can. Okay. Laboratory experiments in the social sciences, experiments in criminology, etc. The Handbook of Experimental Economics, social experiments evaluating public programs, field experiments, models of repeated measurements, system identification theory, business survey methods, introduction to survey research, Bayesian approaches to clinical trials. Okay, that is that section. Yeah, let's see what we have here. Theories of social remembering. Okay, in other words, when you look back at the past, you have all kinds of things that are going to remind you of what's happening in the past, in addition to your own feeble memory of what's going on. So I have a big section on that. Epidemiology, memory, culture drift. You know that there's a very close connection between epidemiology and the spread of ideas. In other words, the spread of germs and the spread of ideas follow very similar paths, and they often have very similar theoretical representations.
Is that related to the idea of memes also?
Memes?
Memes?
Oh, memes. Memes have become very unpopular.
Oh, that's ironic.
Well, not really. I mean, memes, of course, were invented by Richard. Let's see, who's that guy?
Dawkins?
Yeah, Dawkins. And there actually was a journal of memetics set up, but it became defunct. And the basic reason is that memes do not transmit faithfully. It's like I think they call that the Chinese thing where you whisper something to another person, they whisper to a third person, and so forth, and by the time you get to the end of that, it's completely different.
Oh yeah, I think most people call it telephone today.
It's the instability of memes that I think knock that out. People of course use the word meme. It's become a common word, but there's no organized memetics. And the reason that Dawkins had it is because he was attacking religion through that. In other words, he says, okay, here we have babies, and we have grown-ups, and the grown-ups are indoctrinating babies so that they become bigots of the next generation, in effect. And he coined the term memetics in analogy to the concept of genetic induction. So for one reason or other, it became obsolete. Let's see. But we may have some interesting stuff here. Oh, reliability. The concept of reliability is very important. Um, when you're talking about the propagation of ideas. So that's in this little stack here.
So you're talking about ideas versus like the reliability of an appliance.
Yes, right, right. In other words, uh, things could become reliable because you forget about them. What happens over time? Uh, so a lot of ideas, in fact, the great bulk of things that we experience are all gone, essentially. Uh, and Yeah, so you want some laws that cover that. But okay, so that's a rather important concept, I guess. Okay, so I have this. What is this thing over here? Cross perspectival identifications. Oh, I don't know. Okay, and this gives me the here's the bounded rationality concept, which is underlying just about everything else that we said. For
So that
example,
so that'd be one of the most important stacks right there.
oh, you could say that, right, right, but it's easy to just demonstrate, and bounded rationality is associated with Herb Simon, and also to some extent with Kahneman and Tversky. But I have my reservations about Kahneman and Tversky, to tell you the truth. I think that somebody. Have you heard of Giz, Ginzerenza?
Yeah, Gerd Gigerenzer. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's much more close to Simon, and I find his particular approach more convincing. Okay, so here's procedures explicable by bounded rationality, and I have about 25 of them. And then behavioral decision theory. Okay, a lot of, in other words, if you have, well, I was going to take the case of probability again. When you go from certainty to probability, you're upping the level of complexity by an order of magnitude. Therefore, you want to do something to, try to counteract that. And that is why people do not carry probability distributions around in their heads. And in fact, what they do is take all kinds of shortcuts for that, which is what you would expect. But then again, you don't want to abandon the concept of probability entirely, because that is the way that a perfect being would reason. So it's a complex compromise between those various things. Okay, so let's see. That's bounded rationality, behavioral decision. So in other words, what we're doing is contrasting rational decision theory, a la economics, with behavioral decision theory, which works with much more simplified concepts that does not use probability theory to its maximum extent, and which leaves out a whole bunch of stuff, etc. Yeah, here we go. Here's H.A. Simon.
Oh, which book of his are you looking at there?
Okay,
Oh.
and let's see what we have here. Causality. Causality is not well understood, I believe. Causal explanation and deduction in science. Bayesian analysis of time series and dynamic models. Structural equation modeling. Neighborhoods and health. Okay, this refers to a whole bunch of different fallacies, you might say. Unit of analysis, the group, the individual, etc. Level of inference, inferences, group, etc. And type of fallacy, ecological, sociologics, atomic, yeah, I think atomic and philosophical. Well, online stochastic combinatorial optimization, coherence, aggregation. All of this should be under causality. I mean, the concept of causality, I think, comes before the concept of probability. I would say every organism has a little intuitive concept of causality. And finally, what have we here? Looks like causal laws, population balances, and biometrical engineering. Don't ask me why these are together. The concept of emergence. And here's Donald T. Campbell again. Blaylock. Causal models in the social sciences. Interpreting epidemiological evidence. Sound science, junk policy. Environmental health sciences and the decision-making process. So that is relevant to human capital. The nature of demography, and let's see, okay. The Blackwell Handbook of Adult Developing and Aging. This is where you got the population and age distribution doing, and I have a little white thing talking about the function of death. So that's roughly where we are.
Well, thanks for that tour of your yellow cards.
Yeah, well, obviously it has to be abbreviated rather radically, but so it is.